So I'm Michael Taylor. I'm the Chief Curator and Deputy Director for Art and Education here at VMFA, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. We've been looking forward to it for so long. Tsherin Sherpa was here for the Awaken exhibition in 2019, and thus was born the idea of bringing him back and giving him this wonderful mid-career retrospective. So we're going to have a conversation tonight with Tsherin and John Henry Rice, our curator of South Asian art. And it gives me immense pleasure to as I said, to welcome you and to introduce both of them. So John Henry Rice is my friend and colleague. He's the Rhodes and Leona B Carpenter Curator of South Asian and Islamic art. And he joined the VMFA in 2008. He's a specialist in medieval and early modern South Indian art and architecture. And he received his Bachelor of Arts degree in Art and Architectural History from Wesleyan University and his MA and PhD in the History of Art from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. His first task at VMFA was to lead the reinstallation of our world-class South Asian and Himalayan collections in an expansive suite of 5 new galleries in the 2010 McLaughlin Wing. So do try and visit those along with the Sherpa exhibition. They kind of go together. John Henry has written and lectured on subjects as diverse as symbolic architecture, medieval sculpture, court painting, colonial period printmaking, and photography. Himalayan art has in recent years become a major focus for John Henry, in part inspired by our world-class holdings in this area. He organized and co-curated the exhibition I mentioned earlier, which was called Awaken, a Tibetan Buddhist Journey Towards Enlightenment, which debuted at VMFA in 2019 before traveling to the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco and the Rubin Museum of Art in New York. This exhibition included 3 paintings by Tsherin Sherpa, and the artist visited VMFA as part of the educational programming around that exhibition. A VMFA member travel trip subsequently paid him a visit in his Kathmandu studio later that year, thus further cementing the museum's ties with Sherpa. This engagement with the Nepalese-born Tibetan-American artist's work and ideas inspired John Henry to organize his current exhibition, Tsherin Sherpa's Spirits, which opens Saturday and will later travel to the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. So John Henry is joined on stage tonight by Tsherin Sherpa, the artist. Born in Kathmandu, Nepal in 1968, Sherpa studied traditional Tibetan painting with his father, Master Urgen Dorji Sherpa, when he was around 13 years old. Following a sojourn in Taiwan to study computer science and Mandarin, he continued making Buddhist paintings in Kathmandu until 1998, when he moved to California. There, he maintained his traditional art practice for about a decade, but eventually began to develop his own unique creative vision that stretches, bends, reconfigures, and repurposes elements from Tibetan art, merging them with modern imagery and popular culture to explore a new and exciting visual language that is uniquely his own. The artist's works are included in private collections and museums around the world, including the Rubin, the Queensland Art Gallery in Brisbane, Australia, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, and of course, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Sherpa has also exhibited in galleries and museums across the United States, Europe, and Asia. And following VMFA's opening of Tsherin Sherpa's Spirits, the artist will represent Nepal at its inaugural National Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. So if you get to Venice this summer, go see Sherin's work. Before I bring them up to the stage, I always have to mention our sponsors, and I want to thank Altria for their lead sponsorship of this exhibition. That's the umbilical cord of gold that keeps these wonderful exhibitions coming here. So with that, I'm going to invite John Henry and Tsherin Sherpa to the stage for their conversation. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Michael, very much. Thanks. I will talk in this direction. Yeah, this is really exciting. I'm so excited to share Tsherin's work with a bigger audience than yet has seen his work with this first solo museum exhibition. As Michael told us, this is a warm up to his appearance in Venice later on this year, and it's a big year for Tsherin, and it's a big year for us. And I'm going to give a sort of brief overview of the exhibition first, and then we'll kick off our conversation. Yeah. And in fact, Michael got me started on that. As Michael mentioned, I first met Tsherin when we were developing the show Awaken, and we decided to include 3 of his works in that show. And these speak to his artistic history that Michael mentioned, that Tsherin was for many years a traditional Tibetan Thangka painter trained under his father in Kathmandu. Then moved, as Michael mentioned, to California in 1998, continued for about a decade in traditional work before sort of moving beyond its boundaries to establish his own sort of unique artistic expression. As Michael said, his work bends and twists and reconfigures and transforms elements from traditional Tibetan art in order to ask new questions. And through those transformations, he contemplates the collisions of culture and identity that displaced peoples negotiate. His art really resists simple classification, delicately balancing a number of binaries, including sacred and secular, traditional and modern, seriousness and humor. This exhibition, which, as Michael mentioned, I'm calling a focused mid-career survey, traces the development of Sherpa's contemporary career through his most important body of work, his Spirit series. In this work, he imagines the Tibetan diaspora as it might be experienced by Tibet's local deities, had they, like so many of Tibet's people, been compelled to leave the land of their origin. What, he asks, would these spirits encounter, and how would they adapt to new foreign environments around the globe? The presentation of 40 works borrowed from collections around the world unfolds in the gallery and in the catalog. Makes a great gift. Might as well get to. But it unfolds as a narrative that chronicles both the evolution of these spirits and key developments in Sherpa's life and career. The story it tells is one of loss, struggle, victory, wisdom, re-empowerment, and reflection. And basically, I'm going to walk you through the show in about 5 minutes, and then we'll all be on the same page. It opens with a section we call preview, and as you might imagine, it's to whet your appetite and give you a sense of what's coming. What these 3 works do is sort of foretell 3 critical moments in that story that I was mentioning. The scroll painting on the left is based on Tserin's very first spirit painting, which we'll see in a moment. The scroll on the right, a critical sort of transition that happened in the sort of the middle of this story of development. And the sculpture in the foreground signals a really crucial transformation right towards the end of the story. So in 2009, barely a year into his new career as a contemporary artist, Sherpa was experimenting with creative ideas, and in particular, searching for a visual metaphor that would embody the Himalayan people, himself included, who have been scattered across the globe. Thus, he created his very first spirit character, combining a traditional Tibetan Buddhist deity's head with a human body. Expanding that initial concept, Sherpa began to imagine his spirit's life cycle and participation in a variety of modern-day situations. What, for instance, would happen when they started having children, baby spirits, who may never see the land of their cultural origin? The predominant theme explored in these early works in the series is the loss of identity that accompanies physical dislocation and cultural dispossession. As Sherpa gradually expanded his spirit series, he did not simply dwell on themes of cultural disintegration and loss. Instead, the passivity of his earliest spirits began to be replaced by figures who expressed active resistance to persecution. The shift in mood to images of courage, defiance, and survival was gradual, but catalyzed by dire reports from Tibet of the situation its people were facing. Sherpa himself also was getting, at this point, exasperated with the expectation that he and all his compatriots must be virtuous, enlightened, infinitely peaceful beings. In reality, Tibetans both abroad and back in Tibet were angry. Out of the imagery of defiance, courage, and survival, a discernible change in tone emerged around 2015. Sherpa's figures who earlier had labored to exert themselves suddenly stood taller with emphatic confidence. Pictures of struggle gave way to those of triumph, which mirrored successes in Sherpa's career, especially a pivotal invitation to contribute a work to the collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is the piece on the upper left. Victories, of course, are short-lived, and while the thrill of the next chase might ever beckon, deeper growth requires pause and perspective. Nepal's catastrophic 2015 earthquake tempered Sherpa's recent professional accomplishments, bringing him home for a series of extended trips, leading eventually to his permanent relocation. The artist's accelerating career was slowed just enough for him to take stock and reassess its trajectory. Back in a Kathmandu that was simultaneously familiar and unrecognizable, altered as much by his prolonged absence as by the earthquake's destruction, he began collaborating with traditional artists and found a renewed appreciation for Buddhism's teachings. In 2018, he returned to stay in Nepal. He began reconnecting more deeply with his cultural roots. His career was flourishing. He was feeling energized. And at this time, his spirits underwent a crucial transformation. Their dissolving pigmentation suddenly melted away to reveal not bodies of pallid nothingness, but instead kaleidoscopes of color that Sherpa calls his protectors, wrathful Himalayan Buddhist deities transformed into vigorously whirling representations of strength itself. While he had previously depicted the protectors alongside his spirits, these dynamic forces now began to emerge from within their bodies, like an innate and essential power just rediscovered. There's only one more section. Inspired by this exhibition's retrospective sweep, Tsherin has undertaken a more sustained examination of his spirit's evolution and its parallels to his own experiences. This appraisal has, in particular, led him to contemplate the changing nature of his relationship to the land and people of his birth and upbringing. The product of this project of self-reflection is a new work, his most monumental painting to date, created expressly for this exhibition. So that gives you a sense of what's in the gallery, and I hope you will go see the real thing again and again. Come early, come often. And now, Tsherin, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John.
Good. So this should feel more awkward than it does, but Tsherin and I have spent more than a year talking weekly, almost every week,
yes,
on the phone.
Yes.
And so, other than you guys, this feels very natural. But I thought we would do the sort of thing that we do on the phone, which is I ask Tsherin a lot of questions, and you jokingly call me sometimes. What do you jokingly call me?
Yeah, my psychiatrist.
I like that. I mean, you know. No, it's been a long and interesting process of kind of encouraging Tsherin to sort of look back and remember all these things that he did years ago and what he might have been thinking. And it was together that we ultimately arrived at that sort of narrative arc and understanding of his works. So they're certainly not by any means the only way that someone can interpret these works. But I thought what we do is actually start with that very first spirit painting, and Tsherin, this was one of many works that you were creating in those first couple of years after sort of making the move beyond tradition. But can you just tell us in your way, how you arrived at this character?
So I think while living in California, I was experimenting with different images earlier. And then I wanted to look back into my childhood and draw some inspiration from my childhood. And some of the memories that actually remained with me for many years continuously was these stories that my grandmother used to tell me. So during the winter vacations, I used to go to my uncle, who's my father's youngest brother, who's only 3 years older than me. So we were kind of like friends, and so I would actually study with him. I used to get really scared of my father at that time, so he was more very serious person. So I was actually closer to my uncle, and it was easier for him, for me to actually learn from him. So in his studio, we would be painting these small traditional tankas that he was catering it to the market in Kathmandu. And so I would be there for a few months during the winter vacation and just learn how to apply paint and mix paints and basically paint by numbers kind of a thing. And my grandmother would be in the back, she would make tea for us, and then she would just keep on telling us stories from her village where there were nomads, and then how they encounter various different types of spirits. And so that kind of always remained in my consciousness for some reason. Another thing was also she would sometimes go in the morning to this one temple in Kathmandu, which is right in the middle of the city, which is very popular for both Buddhist and Hindu pilgrims. And we would go there and offer some beverage offering to this protected deity, Mahakala.
I was hoping you might say that.
Yeah.
I've not told Tsherin what I was going to ask him, but
yeah. So, and so this deity's a fearful appearance was very, very fierce, but yet it sort of remained imprinted in my consciousness. Then I was imagining whatever happens to these spirits if many of the local people actually went outside of their environment, if they were traveling and relocating in different places, would the spirits travel with them? And if they did, how do they adjust themselves in this new environment? So that was kind of a question, because I myself was also trying to adjust myself in this new environment, new culture, a lot of new things. So I guess I was very much focused on that, and that's how this first spirit character was born.
And so, to be clear with everyone, this is a painting of Mahakala by Tsherin in the, early 2000s maybe.
Yeah.
and you can see that the iconography of the face is pretty borrowed, and that explains sort of half of your spirit character.
Yes.
The sort of the top half, and then
the bottom half was like again, I was actually Googling on the internet about like people, different. I think at that time, like different Tibetan people living all over the world, and so I found like lots of pictures. I created a mosaic of that over my own body, and kind of superimposed, and then painted the face and the background, and so it's like kind of half photograph, half painting was my first experiment.
yeah, and this your own body. So
Yes.
There's a lot of sort of autobiography in this.
Yes, in the beginning it felt like it was very autobiographical.
Yeah.
It felt as if like I was actually trying to maybe like recount my own story in the work. Yeah.
So it's in part sort of individual identity, but obviously also sort of this collective
Exactly.
of this interconnected network of Tibetans and of a sort of collective Tibetan spirit.
Yeah.
And the other feature of this that stays with the spirits is that melting away of the pigment that you see, and that can be read various ways, like so much of your work.
Yeah.
Is that destruction, or is that revealing something new? In this case, that interconnected network. So I just want to ask you. This is just one work from each of those. This is the narrative in synoptic form. It's probably not the right word. What do you? So I didn't tell Tsherin what would be asking him. My only request was that he just be very honest and not tell me what he thinks I want to hear. We'll see. But is this? So I've laid out this narrative, and I know to some degree it's reductionist. Mm-hmm. But it's to help understand the sort of your evolution and the evolution of this, and to give visitors something to follow. Is it accurate? Is it a little accurate? I mean, how do you feel about where we ended up?
It's actually very interesting. Like when I was creating these spirit characters, it wasn't like in a linear fashion that I was only creating spirits. Along with the spirit character. I sometimes get really bored with one image, like one subject matter, as working on it over and over. So I tend to jump into different like experiments simultaneously. I guess it was because like I used to get really bored painting like 10 taras, or 10 mahakalas. So it's always like exciting to experiment something other than even the subject matter. So, like because I was working in various different works simultaneously, it never occurred to me like there was a gradual development in the spirit character. And when you actually mentioned to me for the first time that this is how you are going to divide, and it was like, wow, it was a revelation to me, actually.
Therapist.
So yeah, that's why I was calling you a therapist, yeah. Which is very true in hindsight. Like when I walked around in the show, and it was kind of something very unaware. Like I was not aware of it. It was not intentional, or it wasn't planned, or anything like that.
There's an interview with you early on in your contemporary career, and you do say even early on, you said to some degree these are my alter egos. So Of course, your own development is going to come out in
Yes.
these to some degree. But I do want, I mean, good. I'm glad I didn't totally get it wrong. Thank you. But I think baked into your work, and one of the things that I think makes your work so compelling is that you intentionally leave a lot of ambiguity. That you don't, it took me a while to figure this out when we would have these conversations on the phone. I would keep asking Tsherin, oh, what does this mean? What does this mean? Why is this color? And why are the hand gestures this way? And why did you do this? And he wouldn't give me clear answers, and I thought that he was just kind of, being a prima donna, an artist, but it took me a while to figure out that he doesn't, that you don't want to fix meanings.
Yes.
And that you want to know what I think. Yeah.
Exactly, and also it has a lot to do with, because sometimes even though it's the image itself is planned in terms of color and like certain gestures or strokes or things, like it's intuitive. Because I think I shared that with you earlier. Like sometimes I do things I don't even know why I want to do that. And then it's only like after a certain period of time, then I get to understand like, oh, so it must have meant or felt like that. So many times I don't know what to say, like when you're asking like, what does this mean? And I don't know, it didn't have a like proper meaning. It's something that I was very strongly driven to create that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't put a word or a specific meaning into it. Yeah. And I think it makes it much more exciting for me when a viewer actually also projects onto the work, and it feels like the work is functioning much more when there is some form of imputed meaning onto the work. I learned one phrase after I came to America, which was, it's either my way or the highway. So that's not intentional. Yeah, that's not there.
Right. Well, I put these two together somewhat with this in mind. That the meaning of your works is very fluid, and you want it to be fluid, and you'd much rather hear what somebody makes of it than to tell them what to think. And that people make very different, two people, I knew I wanted to do this show when I was so compelled by Tserin's work, but then when we had the pieces in Awaken, I would see person after person after person really, really respond to his work. But it was also clear that they were not all responding the same way. Sorts of people were getting different sorts of things out of it, but all were pretty impactful. You've talked about different people looking at the same work, and somebody will tell you about the deep Buddhist meaning in it.
Yeah.
And someone else will.
Yeah. Some Buddhist teachers would actually post it on social media with like a long narrative of Buddhist teaching and philosophical meaning, which I didn't even know of. And sometimes like some fellow friends will like really get angry and agitated because I was manipulating the form. So
right, and calling it sacrilegious. Yeah.
So.
My one real unabashed conceit in the book is I make up a word, and coming out of that some people might see this as iconoclastic, and my new word, my neologism, is icon-elastic. Yeah. But yes, it's balancing. I mentioned balancing these binaries, and that is intentional in your work. I mean, the work on the left here is called Staying Alive. So yes, that is a reference to, you might have guessed, John Travolta. And you know, there are layers and layers of meaning. The spotted underwear and the butterflies, the little Damien Hirst reference. Now the figure on the left, although is at the right, Tara Gaga. You can figure out the conflation there, you know, of Tibetan Buddhist goddess and
Yeah.
contemporary goddess, Lady Gaga, in her 2013 MTV Music Video Awards outfit. Really was that outrageous. But yeah, the fluidity of meaning in your works
Yeah.
is a big deal.
And I think it's much more exciting in that manner, because I feel like I like to give enough space for the viewer to, like, you know, analyze and project, or based on her or his experience, you know. So it's kind of exciting. Yeah.
I love that. That some meaning is created somewhere between
Exactly.
the object and the receiver. Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this up now because it's going to be one of the first hands that goes up. Is your work Buddhist? Do you consider your contemporary? I mean, obviously, you spent the first half of your artistic career creating very much Buddhist religious art, but your contemporary work.
I don't think it was intentional, but if somebody sees some kind of Buddhist element in that, then I think that's good too. But for example, I was actually inspired or encouraged by some of the things that I saw in our culture. For example, a water bottle, you know, a mineral water or whatever in a bottle. Maybe at a 7-Eleven is a merchandise, you know. For someone who's thirsty, it's a water. And then the same water we bring home, we pour it on like silver, like offering bowls. It becomes like purified, sacred water. And so based on its time, space, and functionality, it keeps on changing. So I think artwork should be functioning in the similar manner. That's my assumption, yeah, basically.
Yeah, I love that. What's next? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of these transformations and to bring those up a little bit more. So this is a work on the left very early in also 2009. So right there at the very beginning, and that spirit is sort of crouching, and I thought of this as a halo, but then someone mentioned that it was also like a heavy backpack, sort of a burden as well, with all these icons of you know, modern commerce. And then, you know, we go from that at the beginning to that pivotal moment with the commission from the Victoria and Albert Museum. You know, how conscious? You've said that, you know, it's in part autobiographical, but were you really thinking of your own victory in that commission, or is it all subconscious?
I think I'm not necessarily thinking on the personal level, but I'm thinking in terms of as a whole. Like, for example, well, the story to relate to you on this Victoria and Albert Museum commission. Like, I went there and did some research on some of their collection for, I don't know, 3 days, 4 days or something like that, and documenting all the objects. But nothing really actually there was nothing that really moved me except for like few tankas that still had some reminiscence of incense like smell. And I didn't know what I was going to do for the commission. And I looked at the space and realized like the Himalayan Gallery at the Victoria and Albert Museum is on a corridor.
It's a hallway.
It's a hallway.
Yeah.
So
It's like our current photography gallery.
yeah, so I walked across it and I didn't realize where it started and where it ended, you know. So it was like I was already past the Himalayan Gallery. So it was like I wanted to create a work that spoke something very loud and caught attention of the viewers or visitors. So it was kind of like, a shout out or something like that. So I created this, which actually, then after it was installed, once I was in London, I was at the V&A and I would just sit by the corner and just watch people's reaction, like what happens. And it did actually speak, people would just walk, not noticing anything, and they would just look around and turn around and come back and look at the work. So I think in that sense, maybe there is a victory in the sense I guess, speaking out and making people notice us, you know, not me, but us.
Yeah, yeah. And the title of this work is Victory to the Spirit, so, which is, in Tibetan, it's a phrase.
Yeah, it's like a phrase when one actually crosses the mountain pass. It's like making offering to the god and then saying victory to the god, like for the safe passage, for, removing all the obstacles in getting there. Yeah.
And whether intentional or not, whether conscious or not, there's no way that this wasn't also reflecting your own, metaphorically you were you were reaching a new height, and it was victory to these.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think at that time I was thinking in terms of more collective, definitely, because we were doing a lot of Himalayan contemporary art at that time, and we were getting shows in different venues, but not a prominent place, you know. So I was thinking more collectively, definitely, and so it was kind of like an opportunity to actually, yeah.
Just another one of these early late pairings, and just also to make that clearer to you guys, that transition, that transformation that happens around 2018. It's a big deal, knowing your body of work and you're working on these protectors separately, and then they kind of come in to be juxtaposed with your spirits, and then suddenly they're emerging from within. What was your thinking there? Was that conscious that the way that I've interpreted it, which is not the only way, of recognizing one's own power, is it accurate, and was that sort of a conscious decision?
I think after I arrived back in Nepal, what I felt was I wasn't actually thinking inward. I was actually looking outward. I saw 20 years ago, before I left Nepal, I think that energy, that vibrancy, that kind of attitude, that confidence was not there. So this time, in 2018, when I got there, I came across many friends who had been abroad, educated, came back, and they have all of these energy and positivity that they want to do something in this country. They want to create something we can do it, and that kind of attitude. And I was really surprised, actually. So it was like not the confidence of just myself or anything like that. I was completely looking outward. So probably I was trying to project that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to keep moving on. I think there'll be an opportunity to come back to that with the last slide. I think this is the penultimate one. These pieces, you're a painter, and when one goes through the show, you see three sculptures, three-dimensional works. One is painted and is a sort of three-dimensional translation of that two-dimensional painting we just saw. But the other two are not really painted objects at all, save the hair of the little bronze. You start collaborating with craftsmen after returning from the earthquake, and tell me, this is a big shift in your practice.
Yes.
And tell me some of that.
So the first thing what happened was, after I went back, the first thing I noticed in Kathmandu, specifically Bodha, is a place where my father lives and where I grew up, where I was born. I noticed like this big monument, which is like a stupa, was actually, it had like cracks from the earthquake. And there was like all kinds of scaffolds for restoration. And it was a very sad moment for me to see that, like growing up, I used to go with my mom to circumambulate this every morning. And every time I had exams or anything, like I needed a visa to go to Taiwan or whatever, I used to pray to this, temple where I could depend on. But this itself was in a very critical situation. So that sort of really, really touched me. And then also simultaneously, my father and I were having conversation, are there highly trained artists or artisans today who can actually do the same quality of restoration? So all of these were actually just swirling in my head. And then I had a small studio in the outskirts of Bodha, and there I was also in preparation for a show that was coming up in Hong Kong. And that's when I actually found out there were lots of copper repoussé workers around that area. And then I went and visited some of them, and came across one named Rajan Shah. Went to his studio, and then we started talking, and then I was also getting to learn about the situation of traditional artists. Some of these artists, because they're not savvy enough to navigate this art scene or whatever, that they are always left behind, even though their work quality is exceptional. So then they're taken advantage of, or this or that, or not being able to compete in the market with others. And so I felt like maybe there's something I can do about this. And so we started collaborating, and I was at the same time afraid that he may think this work is very sacrilegious, I'm not going to do it or anything like that. But I was happy that he agreed to work on this. So after collaborating with Rajan, then I had the opportunity to work with artists locally. So now it has become more of a project for me to see if I can collaborate with them, and then have these works have their works or our works, make it visible, like in a
Yeah,
broad.
and you've insisted that the names of these collaborators
Yes.
end up on the labels and,
Yes.
and be in the databases. You
Yes.
know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Help.
It's very important, I think, because I know, like, I've seen it with my father, who's a traditional artist, and sometimes, like, people would visit his studio, take photograph of his work, and then sometimes we see books being published, and all of a sudden there's his painting, and his name is not even, like, mentioned there, you know.
Right.
So, and it's kind of disheartening. So, yeah.
And you're working with craftsmen from a variety of traditions on your
Absolutely.
biennale
Absolutely.
installation.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're I want to leave time for questions and answers, so I'm going to leave that up in case that any of you want to ask any questions about that rather than I. But you know, this is a magnificent piece. Like, if it's worth the price of admission, just the finale piece, and the way that you talk about it. And the one thing that I'll say about it before opening it up for questions is you have talked about this in various ways with me. And two of the things that I love most about it are, you said, you know, I want to make a piece that demonstrates that these spirits, you know, are not just about me, you know, that they're about us.
Yeah.
You know, and this is to me the really us piece. And in elaborating on that, one of the ways that you make an analogy here is of this as a troupe of actors.
Yeah.
At the well, here you say.
Yeah, well, I was invited to collaborate for one opera in New York, and I projected my work in the background, and then there were all of these troops, like at the final stage, like they come forward, and that was so dynamic, like it just stuck in that image just stuck in my head. So I wanted to create something like that, and also very strongly influenced by, like, growing up, like we would see these big billboards of Bollywood movies, you know, because that was the only popular culture that we had access to when I was growing up in the 80s.
Hand-painted billboards.
Yeah, hand-painted billboards.
And back to the dramatic analogy, you know, you talk about this as an incomplete group of 12.
Yeah.
And that the 12th person is the one before it.
Yeah,
who's sort of invited into this group of these life-size, very vibrant, dramatic figures. So, Izzy's looking at me. So, let's have your questions.
Tashitile Tsherin La Tuchenang. Thank you so much. I just have a couple of questions. Just so you know, I'm studying Himalayan studies and Tibetan Buddhism, and so I was very, much anticipating your talk, and it's a pleasure to be here. So, my first question is, in your art, would you say that there is an element of portraying the experiences of the younger generation of the Tibetan diaspora and, like, their encounter with, like, modern culture and, like, how to navigate that?
I think it's not really thinking about the younger generation or anything like that. I think the younger generation is much more savvy than myself. Like, so I think I was more concerned about my own experiences, having to, like, I traveled to various different places before I arrived in America, and then always was concerned about adjusting myself into that environment. For example, growing up, even in school, like in Nepal, like there are very few people that were from the more mountainous region in my classes, and was always trying to adjust and learn very quickly so that we can blend in, you know. So similarly, I think that same experience was there when I was in Taiwan. And then again, coming to America, it feels awkward to be unusual individual, you know, so always trying to blend in. So I guess maybe I was focusing more on that. But I forgot your second question, so.
My second question is, when you talked about the spirits, particularly,
Yeah.
The local deities and the Dharma protectors, and you're exploring them going into new environments,
Yes.
maybe Western environments. So, is your art trying to portray a tension between those two cultures, or more of like the victory in that particular series, like more of like there is no conflict and there's just they can be translated into different environments? More of the latter, maybe?
Maybe, I think it's there's no tension, I think. For example, if you, I think earlier John had showed an image where there's a big backpack and the Mahakala sitting. That work was created sometime around 2009, 2010. And that was a direct response to one of the experiences that I had at the Asian Art Museum in 2003. The idea was I was a traditional Thangka painter back then, and there was a program called Asia Alive, and I was there month-long, in a month-long residency, making traditional Thangka, and there were visitors who would sit around and watch me do this. And then during my lunch break, I was having sandwich and a Coca-Cola. And basically a lady, a very nice lady actually, she started crying seeing me drinking Coca-Cola. You know, she was like, I feel so bad, like we corrupted you. And I was like, but I actually grew up drinking Coca-Cola. You know? So I guess I was trying to probably tackle with that kind of projection sometimes, because, and the title of the work is Oh My Godness, you know? It's basically, I think, I'm trying to communicate with the audience that I'm as normal and as, you know,
Complex, maybe.
Complex, yeah.
Conflicted.
Yeah, conflicted as anybody. Yeah.
Well, that clarifies a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here. It's an amazing exhibition. And going from the sublime to the ridiculous, I want to know about the bubble gum.
Yeah.
What is your memory of bubble gum?
Honestly speaking, probably I was trying to, because sometimes some of my deity images are very, very wrathful, and I enjoy painting them just I guess it's second nature, basically making these Mahakalas look really fearful. And then at the end, when the painting is completed, sometimes even I am scared at looking at that because of so I wanted to probably tone down that scary part. And because it has to be fun and interactive sometimes, some of the works, and it's not, I guess it's just for my own thing, you know. I can't be serious at certain times, yeah. So the bubble gum actually adds like an ornament onto the work. So.
I've got a question regarding I feel like traditionally there's a kind of concept or a feeling that the spirits like live in this place. Like they are, you go to the stupa, you go to temple, the spirits live in this place. And I just feel like looking at your work, it feels like they are just jumped off, and you want to be saying that they are everywhere, that the spirits don't live just in this place. Is that part of your intention in showing how they truly are alive and within, or kind of what is there any of that in your work?
So I think it's my imagination. Like, for example, I feel this spirit, the whole idea of spirit is a collective idea. It's a mental phenomena that is created by the people who have a collective, agreement, let's say. And so if the people are moving, probably this idea is also going to move around. And having said that, again, on the, I'm also a huge, Star Wars and, superhero idea fan. And it's almost like they act like a superhero, basically. And in some ways, I think the Buddhist deities are like a superhero. It's just that they're like depicted in a very traditional format. It appears like different, but the functionality is very much like superheroes. So I'm beginning to more and more see them as like Himalayan superhero or something like that, where we have like every individual has some form of wish or like something to look up to, something to gauge oneself with, a barometer or something. So the idea of superhero, I think.
Hi. What? Can you hear me? First of all, your work is absolutely stunning, powerful, fun. Love it. My question, or two questions. One is hypothetical. If you had not moved to the United States, do you think you would have created this work, this collection, these pieces? And how soon after you moved to the United States did you create Inception? Was that the first piece?
Yes. Very good question. I think, I forgot to mention this story earlier. I moved here in 1998, and when I actually came to the US, I think I knew of like 3 artists, Picasso, Salvador Dali, and Michelangelo. I think that was about it, like about the Western art history, So, meaning that we had so limited access. We didn't have any museums. We had one museum, like Townie Museum, which like it's just in a very critical condition at that time. And very few art galleries. So the artistic culture that I was really, really close to was just religious iconography, and that was about it. And specifically, like in a place where I was born and brought up, like in Bodhanath, which is the outskirt of Kathmandu, it functions like its own country again. Like this, even today, like they have their own culture, they have their own thing. So I was so disassociated from like any kind of modern art culture or anything like that. So, and the traditional art was also becoming more and more commodified since the 60s and 70s because there was more and more demand from the visitors and I think factories started like mushrooming in Nepal and so I never wanted to be an artist in the beginning. I saw my dad's like situation and it was like, this is not what I want, but because I didn't know anything else and I ended up doing tankas. But it was only after I arrived in America at the Asian Art Museum, I still vividly remember, like I went there with some friends, I think paid $10 for the entrance fee for the first time, walking into a museum and saw this huge tankas, displayed in the museum. And I was shocked, like, I'm paying $10 to see this tankas. Saw the catalogs. And this is the first time I started really, really appreciating my own culture, heritage, and it has so much to do with America. And whereas my work is concerned, I think it was actually like after that kind of experience, it gave me more like opportunity to interact with more galleries, museums, other types of museums, other types of artistic practices, and that gave me courage and also, started exploring more, and that's how it started.
So I actually have a two-part question. First to John, actually. So when you put on your hat as a therapist, psychiatric hat, the seventh theme that you developed for him that was presented here, did it have anything to do with the circle of life theme in the Buddhism?
Did it have anything to do with?
With how we have the circle of life theme in the Buddhism?
Not consciously, but maybe I need a therapist, right?
Maybe I can be your therapist now.
So no, not consciously, but but that is, cycle of life is pretty universal. So yeah, but not specifically. I wasn't specifically thinking about
Sure, thank you.
Buddhist ideas.
Yeah. And then the two questions for you, Tsherin Ju, is the first one with regards to Tara Gaga. That particular painting originated with me so well because I have a 12-year-old daughter. I can explain to her now the culture, the fusion of culture, the Buddhism, and then with the Lady Gaga. She is now really into K-pop. When can I expect to see Tara pop?
Should I put up Gangnam Style?
Huh?
Gangnam Style.
What is?
The Conqueror Gangnam Style.
Oh,
There's a K-pop. There's a K-pop.
There's a K-pop theme there too.
yeah.
I
That
don't know
one
if
in
I
the
can.
middle?
Upper towards the right. It's called Conqueror Gangnam Style.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the last question that I have is, you mentioned when you saw those cracks on the stupa right after the earthquake,
Yeah.
that siphoned the spirits away from you. As you recall, 1980s was a time of a kleptocracy in Nepal. From all kinds of society, especially people in power, stole all the images, most of them, and sent them to the Western world. And it took the spirit away of the Nepali people. And we're still trying to recover those stolen images back and get it repatriated to Nepal. So from your point of view, should the spirits live here as well?
I think they do. They do. I think it's again, like, it also depends on the, how would I put it? Like, I think it's basically the motivation of the collective again. Because yes, it's true, many icons and like statues, they were like dispersed at that time. Having said that, again, I recounted my own experience. Like, for example, for me to come here in the US to encounter this image and then appreciate my own culture. So a public institution like this also has a huge role in invoking this spirit. So I felt that. So I'm sure this happens. It's basically, I think, yes, it's both important, but again, it functions in many ways. Just that's why, I never want to have a specific meaning of my work, because it functions in so many different ways for so many different people. I remember my teacher used to listen to a lot of Buddhist tape when I was still painting tankas here in the States, and he used to say a falling leaf can symbolize so many things for so many people. For a Buddhist, it's impermanence, For somebody who gets agitated with leaves, for them it's agitation because they need to clean it. For some it's a renewal. So every individual actually responds differently to that same situation.